So, Trevor, tell everybody, why are you the right person to serve on Wilton's Planning and Zoning Commission?
I have an extensive background in building and zoning experience. I've played a role, I think I've been on the Zoning Board of Appeals for the last year and a half, I think, something like that. I'm also on the Architectural Review Board. So I've got a fair amount of experience, both in just actually how to read plans and build a building and then also in kind of working with the town to think about these kind of issues.
I'm sure then you have an opinion about how Wilton has approached development in the last few years. What's your take on it?
Well, so my take is that we haven't. We, it appears that the Planning and Zoning Board has not done a great job of planning, okay, and that they have allowed the process to be driven by kind of a review of what a specific developer proposes, as opposed to having a plan and then trying to get people to conform to that plan. So we spend a lot of time arguing about facades of buildings, um, what color paint it should be, and those aren't really things that the planning and zoning should spend a lot of time worrying about. Obviously, if it's not something that's going to fit somehow into the plan, it can be commented on, and the Architectural Review Board is also involved in that process itself. But what we should be doing is coming up with a plan. The overlays that have been developed over the years are pretty actually interesting documents. And if we could get the town to support those or develop new ones that reflected kind of better rules or better concepts of what we want our downtowns to look like. And more importantly, we need those for every kind of area of potential development in the town of Wilton, not just downtown Wilton. And then once we have those kind of, if we could get the town to kind of coalesce behind, these kind of overlay plans, then we could actually be efficient with developers, and developers might think of Wilton as a great place to develop. There's nothing wrong with being supportive of that side of the economy as well. But first, we've really got to figure out what the town and the people of the Wilton want as a concept versus just having a new design put in front of us and spending weeks and weeks and weeks looking at details that really we shouldn't be involved in.
Do you think that the master plan that was done for the downtown area, do you think that's a whole situation that needs to be revisited? Are you happy with
Yeah.
what's
So
been done?
so so I think they're actually pretty good documents to begin with. Okay. I don't think that the town the town in general is as aware of them as they should be, and I don't think the other boards in town use them, or at least I've never seen them referred to in like a board of selectmen meeting. So having these great plans off to the side that no one refers to or uses, other than maybe P and Z, okay, maybe they're really thinking about it and using them, but no one else has bought into them. So instead of saying, does this fit the overlay, they're talking about the color of the building or whether it should be brick or wood, or those are, developers pay a lot, architects a lot of money to have a great design. If they had a guideline to hit, up front, that would be a better way to work it versus, no one really supporting the plan, POCD or the overlays that really are the detail behind those. And then we don't have them for every area of town. So there might be some development up at Cannondale coming soon. We don't have a concept of that yet. I don't think we have any specific overlays for the Route 7 corridor. And there are some great developments that have happened without that, but there's some not so great.
So you talk about engaging the public more, or, where talk about how planning and zoning and the public have been interacting, and how do you get them more engaged? How do you, get them more informed?
Well, so I think so. One of the key things is to actually get all of the boards to be as aligned as possible. Okay. So again, if planning and zoning does a fabulous job of holding town meetings and things like that, and they come up with these great plans, if the other boards aren't really supporting those and trying to move in that direction, like the plan of conservation, the POCD currently has this great river walk, okay? And it's been on there for 10 years. It's a great design, but if no one's going to enforce it or have a big effort or do something about it, it's just a really interesting piece of paper.
Especially because you've got a new POCD process coming up that whoever is elected to the board will have input on and be part of.
Yep.
I remember the last process, and I remember the meetings where the public was invited and people around and putting their ideas and sticking the post-it notes on the different drawings that they liked and giving ideas. And, people move in, people move out. And a lot of people seem to think that, P&Z is operating by its own mission and ignoring the public. But the public had input on that POCD. Do you think that the public doesn't understand that? Or, when you hear all of this, dissatisfaction with, they're not listening to what the public wants. Is that a fair accusation about planning and zoning right now?
Look, the job of public or municipal workers or municipal people that hold office is to try to convey, to get the public to coalesce and then to follow what they coalesced on to the best they can. So maybe we need to every year have a meeting or two or four that are, let's revisit the plan. Okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with revisiting it just to inform. And then maybe there's some better, we've built 2 buildings that was unsuccessful in that direction. Let's do it again. Tweak it again. If it is not the P&Z sitting there arguing over whether it should be 30 cars or 29 cars or, everyone has their opinion. It's just not very successful. That doesn't mean they should absolutely be heard, but that's not, if you actually want to change the policy, let's do more planning. So that's, amongst the crew of my slate of Democratic P&Z candidates, we are really focused on the P in planning and zoning. Let's do more planning. We do a lot of zoning discussions on Zoom. And, I don't think the public is thinking this is a great process. Let's do a lot less of that and more planning on Zoom. Okay. Or in person, whichever, we figure out. But then again, if the planning and zoning just comes up with their own document and Board of Selectmen hasn't bought in somehow and the Board of Finance isn't behind it, I don't know exactly where they would be. Then it just is a document that gets filed on the website and it never gets anywhere.
You mentioned about the meetings. Do you think that they should be, held in hybrid? I mean, right now they are just on Zoom. Do you think that needs to change?
I'm open to talking about the change. I'm not sure that. I don't think that's the main driver of dysfunction. Okay, so if we went through some sort of a meeting process and people said, look, that's the key to it, otherwise we'd have wonderful buildings, I'd be totally happy to meet in person. It is, the board members do have a lot of time invested in this. It's a very convenient way for people to join in as members and as the public when they're not able to get to a specific room in Comstock or wherever. So I don't think it's an important factor to the success one way or the other.
What do you think about the argument that, that the way public comment is relegated to the last part of a public hearing? The argument that that's done because, you don't want to open up the town to any kind of, liability or legal liability. What do you think about that? Does the public need to understand that more, or can the process change?
So I'd like to see the process change. Okay. I'm not sure I'm up to date as much as I would like to be on the legal, other than I've heard that that's the excuse for why we do it. Okay. But I have not yet seen the documentation that really does anything legally. So the timing of it is interesting. It's awkward to have it at the end because it seems like it's kind of a throwaway. And again, many of the concepts that are being talked about, talking about 400 times, the number of car places when there's a formula in the POCD or the overlay that should be straightforward. And if it's not, it needs to be corrected. But, these are not necessarily decisions that we as board members are just making out of the top of your head. There is a rule, or there's an underlying zoning rule, and we should be complying with that and making judgment calls when we need to.
You used a great phrase before, driver of dysfunction. I'm curious, assuming the online meeting isn't the driver of dysfunction. Is there dysfunction, and what is the driver of dysfunction for the P&Z?
I never hear anything about, why are we having these 3 hours of public comment? What are we trying to, if it literally is just to hear people complain, okay, or support, if that's the purpose, then it's achieving exactly what it's doing. If it's trying to actually have people that are feeling like they're being heard, it's not working. Okay. I don't, the example that, some of the worst examples that we've seen in the last couple of months, I'm sure those people didn't walk away and say, boy, am I glad I got heard tonight. So now I'm not sure which way, who's at fault there, but it isn't being successful for either the board members or the town, the people in the town.
You mentioned earlier the idea of different areas for overlays or for more master planning. Where would you go next?
Well, I would. So it's really hard right now to even get a map, but from the town, of the areas that are being considered. You guys have actually, you're the only source of information on where developments are happening. Okay. There should be a map on town. We've got 4 people interested in developing up near Cannondale. Okay. Well, Cannondale's, there are some train related or transportation related issues going on at the state level. We know that's going to be an area that something's going to occur on. Maybe we should just start planning for it. Okay. So that's a good way. We have a big development down at the main train station. I think that's farther, is a interesting and good project at this point, but I'm not sure that we have an overlay that helped guide it. It was their solution to our problems. Obviously we'll have some more dialogue on it and stuff like that, but we shouldn't, it's just not successful to have 5 years of architects' drawings, and then we come in and say, by the way, it shouldn't have a tower on it. It should have, another different roof. Okay. That's, I don't think that's a very successful way to achieve our goals.
So with Cannondale possibly in the pipeline, is there any other area of town you think, deserves has a more pressing need for attending to the master plan in that area?
So there's a Route 7 corridor there.
Mhm.
Some of them are some of the areas are very commercial. Some of them have sporadic residential development areas in them. So we could break those down further and maybe have some emphasis on, more corporate areas and more residential areas. There's the Baptist Church, and I apologize if I don't have the exact right name of that location on Route 7. There's a very interesting project going on there to look at as possibly, kind of inspiration. It's also mimicked, there's a condo unit up past Route 7 and 33 that has been there for, at least 20 or 30 years, to look at as an example for kind of maybe a direction we're heading in. And then applying that to strategic areas in town to say, hey, this is a good area for this kind of a development.
What about affordable housing? How
So,
important?
so affordable housing is a huge problem in town. I'm very supportive of trying to achieve the 10% goal of affordable housing. I've actually started a letter to you guys. Unfortunately, it's thousands of words long, not 300 or something like that.
800.
And that's where I was trying to find the different developments. And it looks like we're in a reasonably good track to hit some of these goals with a little more planning. The numbers I've come up with are, we need 650-ish houses to be 10%, or affordable housing units to be at 10%. We have something like, I think 100 and I'm making these numbers up off the top of my head because I can't remember them in detail, but I think we have something like 120 or 30 currently out there. We have another 150 of completed projects and those that have been supported by the P&Z at this point. So we're at like something like 300 or 400 units of the 650 that we need, and the next 200 or 300 of those just need to be thoughtfully planned. I think the town owns some buildings that or some properties that might be able to be developed into affordable housing units that are 100% affordable housing. That could have some great ideas. Maybe private, we could contribute the land, and private companies could come in and do the building with some thought. So that could be another overlay is how do you do private public partnerships in town. One of our other citizens in town had an idea of developing the land that was Super 7 from the state, if we could ever get access to those lands. But those are just, let's everyone, 10% affordable housing units is definitely a goal we should be trying to hit. It would be great if people that are getting a little older, as I am, could possibly move, downsize from 2-acre zoning to something downtown that we could walk around and go to restaurants in. That may not be affordable housing, but at least it's more affordable housing. So
Along those lines, I think that planning and zoning has approved 900 multifamily units, around that number, in the last few years.
right.
Is multifamily, rental housing where we continue to need to develop, or, what other kinds of housing would you think that?
Well, again, if you look at the development that might happen on the Baptist Church property, that's a 10-unit, and again, I apologize if my numbers aren't perfect, a 10 or 15 unit property. I don't know whether it's any of it's affordable housing at this point. We should have a goal that most of these properties have 15% affordable housing, because you can never get to 10% by having a 10% target. That's some simple math that we should have realized with the current board. so they don't all have to be 5-story condo buildings and stuff like that. And again, they could be special projects where it's 100% affordable housing, but it's 20 units. It's not 600 units of affordable housing all in one spot, impacting something.
Is there a nearby town that you think Wilton should emulate or look to as a good example for development and planning?
I'm not sure that we want to go out and copy another town. Okay, Wilton does have a unique personality. I think it would be great to go and look at specific situations in other towns. You know, a lot of people are afraid, or don't want to have buildings that are close to the street, because most of our buildings downtown are kind of set back or have parking spaces around them, and so they aren't. But if you go to other towns, there's some cute little areas with Restaurant Row in New Canaan, where it's a very tight alleyway for 3 blocks. And there's some fabulous developments that are actually, you go up a flight or two, and then they set back 30 feet, and then you have residential there. You can't even see the residential from the street. So there are places that we might look at, but I don't think it's very successful to go to something like New Canaan and say, oh, let's do New Canaan. We're probably not going to rip up every road downtown and make it, Main Street, New Canaan, with parallel parking or side-by-side parking everywhere. It's just not probably realistic.
Well, so then if you're looking internally, reflecting on what Wilton is, do you have a new favorite building or business or open space in Wilton that you like, so people get a sense of, you and what you prefer?
That's one of the problems that I'm trying to move away from, is that board members are imposing their architectural preference. Okay, there are classic New England buildings downtown, the main at Center, that's a great building. Okay, it needs a lot. It could be something more, but still stay in that vernacular. Okay, but you also look at the Wilton Library. There's nothing necessarily classic Yankee about that, and yet it is a wonderful type of building, a modern building in town, and I think it fits in, and that dichotomy is okay. Gregory and Adams building is a modern building with vernacular that reflects New England a little. Okay, so I think the mix of different types of architectural styles is great. We don't want cookie cutter, the same thing everywhere, and I don't think we're going to get that. So I'm not overly worried about that. So again, what I want people to do is really come up with it. I think these overlays are great. Okay, so if we actually were talking about those versus, should it be a modern building or a classic Yankee building, or, if it doesn't have brick on it, it's not the right type of a downtown building. I think we should have concepts to follow, not huge discussions over exactly what materials are used or not used. 10 years later, are they allowed to change the color? It seems pretty petty.
Well, one of the things, when you talk about what downtown has or doesn't have, or that's going to need to be addressed, is parking. Whether it's the 30 spots, 31 spots, what not so much that disagreement, but in the larger 30,000 foot
Sure.
view, how do you think Wilton Center can approach parking? You've already got the library or real retail spaces saying parking's for customers only. We're going to start to have those challenges. How do you think we need to approach that?
Well, so I am not a parking expert on the number of cars per building. Okay, so I am not that yet. I'm sure that we have a pretty good approach to that in town. My experience, and I work in town. I go to the village market twice a day often. I'm downtown a lot. I've, I, I frankly have never had a problem with parking. Maybe it's not parking right at the front door of the building I want to go into, but I've never experienced parking like I've experienced it in New Canaan or in Darien or in Greenwich. So I'm not 100% sure what the panic is. Let's be realistic. In the next 20 or 30 years, which is kind of where we should be parking planning for, who knows how many parking places we're going to need. There could be a lot more autonomous cars or something like that. So, I don't know whether that's far fetched. I don't know whether that applies to a town like Wilton, but I'm not sure why the current system is so broken. But I may be missing something. Through my experience with Wilton CERT, we spend a lot of time on the roads in Wilton, and we know them pretty well. So,
well, that's interesting, because people have talked about traffic and the worry about traffic in Wilton with all of these large multifamily developments coming up. And whether you want to talk about, you've got the new building that's happening behind the library, you've got the Kimco project, you've got, the development that was just approved, close to Village Market. There are likely to be more. So given your experience with CERT and given the, discussions that people have had about making Wilton more walkable and more vibrant to get people out and walking more, should there be a different approach? Do we need some sort of municipal parking lot? Do we need, I don't know, different type of parking?
So again, I would be more kind of data driven, and I'm not sure I have the data in my head of what, is there a projection currently that we need more parking? Okay. If the answer is we need desperately more parking, I don't have a problem thinking about a municipal parking lot. I do think that I would like to see Wilton a little more walkable. I know a lot about the safety of the roads in Wilton, downtown especially. So there are some ideas there are some easements that we currently have that could add a road or something and increase some flow and circulation in town. I think it would be great to the overlays that are currently in place and should be more front and center, I believe, provide for a better walking area and increased parking on streets, possibly. And if we could make people or get people to walk from building to building, as opposed to, currently I park at Village Market and then go to the CVS and park over there. It'd be great to be able to walk and feel safe about it too. So I don't understand the parking dilemma at this point, because I don't see it as a problem. The increased in population, I want to be proven. I want to prove that that's gonna increase the parking problem. I mean, let's plan for it. But the number of people we're adding to downtown, it's hundreds of people, not thousands. Okay. Now there are going to be, if you take the Route 7 and stuff like that, it could be, thousands of people that are joining in, or thousands of units, and probably in the lower thousand number of units. And we are going to develop Route 7, and there are going to be other places to shop and combine. The new development at where the the Wilton Hardware moved, is a fabulous example of a nice little community kind of downtown, development, so.
Yeah, I know you don't want to go into your opinions about different things, but I'm curious about, as a resident, as someone who spends a lot of time in the downtown. What would you like to see as an amenity? If you could pick anything, any sort of interesting, kind of neat
Oh,
thing to add to.
so, so, so I think the River Walk would be a spectacular idea. Okay, and it should be something that is either, you know, figured out how we do it, or at least be honest and say we're not going to do it. Okay, but I think it is. It could tie the whole town together, and I really mean from the Shanks Island and the pond, horseshoe, whatever it's called, the pond, all the way up to the high school and Allen's Meadows and stuff. I mean, it could be really interesting. I think there's a chance you could possibly develop more business from it. People are congregating there and looking at the backside of some of the buildings that are on the streets, and possibly sell a athletic drink or something, shoes. I don't know. But I think that should be done. I really wish we could put the bridge to nowhere going to Shanks Island. I think we should try to get the railroad company or the train guys to let us put another crossing there. I know that may be a little of a pipe dream, but again, if that was the only thing that, or a primary thing that the town and the board was talking to the state about, or whoever they need to talk to about it, I think that would be a great expansion, because then we could tie kind of downtown and Route 7 together a little.
Part of what drives that too is the question about signage, both, wayfinding signage to get people to Wilton Center, all these people who say, oh, I never knew that Wilton Center existed, that kind of thing. And also the issue of, stores and retailers who feel that our signage regulations have been challenging for them to do business in town. How do you approach that?
We've had a couple of examples of people coming to the ZBA for towns, for better signage application. It's funny that the town has actually done that. Come and said, I want my town letters to be bigger, town halls or the anyway. So again, I haven't had the detailed experience on what's driving the size of the lettering there. But if the town itself thinks it should have bigger letters, I don't see that as a huge problem. I'm hoping we're not going to have a billboard, the size of unlimited size. But I don't see the current development over where Wilton Hardware is. I don't see any issues with that signage. I don't know whether they're complaining and want bigger signage, but the signage on the buildings could be bigger, as opposed to the signposts out on the road. I mean, maybe that's a way to look at it.
How about height limits on buildings?
Oh, on buildings. So, so I'm not 100% sure how we came up with 4 stories and then a setback and then a 5th story as an option downtown. I don't think it's crazy. Okay. I might be a little more crafty in how the setback is done, but that has yet to be explained, or to be developed well. I don't think anybody downtown, I don't think many citizens fully understand what a setback is and how it can be pretty effective at letting, have another floor, but not really seeing it from the street and letting in air. If the number were changed to 4 instead of 5, I'd be open to that idea. I don't know what drove that in particular. If you go to other towns, many of those buildings in the other towns that have kind of developed a little further than Wilton has at this point are easily in the 4 to 5 story range. So I don't think that's terrible. If the town said, let's do 3 with the 4th story that was a setback, I don't think that'd be terrible either. I don't think, on Route 7, I think you could be more lenient or flexible there.
So the last question, what is your 30-second elevator pitch for why voters should choose you?
Well, so I've had a lot of experience leading municipal and nonprofit organizations and corporate America. Um, I think I can bring my building experience into the P&Z. I know how to read plans very, very well. I understand how to build, and I understand the development process. And I think I can help pull together both the town's opinion and provide for control of what we want and increase efficiency for the developers so that they think of Wilton as a great place to do great projects.
Trevor, thank you very much for your time. It's good to
Thank you.
talk to you.
Thank you very much.